Rise of the Griots WordCast.
We are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Summer we are go. Out of a blasted mine. We are bubble. Volcano just a rubble. And we in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. Middle East war gone real far. Iraqi planes bombing again. Oil on the brains. Running through Reagan veins. We are bubble. We are bubble. Iranian planes bombing again. Lebanon in trouble. PLO on the double. Israeli war stretch real far. Right down in South Africa, part of a global mafia. We are bubble. We are bubble. We are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Summer we are go. Out of a blasted mine. We are bubble. Volcano just a rubble. And we in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. Pan-European putting on the heat. Wanting all we Africans to bow at their feet. We are bubble. We are bubble. Butter a come to put us to sleep. Reagan a come to step on with feet. Thatcher a come to kick we underneath. Mertran a come to see if we weep. And when you think them have us at we feet, Russia a come to make we deplete. We are bubble. We are bubble. Boof! We are come with the warrior beat. We have to fight this mental sleep. Stand firm on our own 2 feet. We are bubble, our people in a trouble. But them nah burst with bubble. Cause we are good upon the double. And put them in a trouble. We are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Summer we are go. Out of a blasted mine. We are bubble. Volcano just a rubble. And we in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. All nation in a trouble.
Rise of the Griots WordCast.
Tendai Mwari Hotep Arku Justin Deb, meaning life, prosperity, and health, as spoken in the ancient language of the Kemetu, or Hudu, means freedom, Rastafari, African power for all African people. This is ShakaRa, your resident spoken word activist, bringing you another episode of the Rise of the Griots spoken word cast, kings and queens. Yes, this is the, weekly forum whereby we just go into the lyrics, the poetical lyrics of the African diaspora, and I share my thoughts, my feelings, my energies, my vibrations with you all. Welcome and thanks for those who checked out the first edition, where we delve deep into the poem by the name of Song of the Motherland by Anom Iyapo, aka Ankh Anum. This week, I'm going to continue in the vein of just touching on the foundational spoken word artists and poets that have contributed to my own personal development. And so last week, having dealt with Brother Ankh Anum, we're going to go inner the warrior empress duo that is Lioness Chant family. Lioness Chant are made up of 2 of my aunties, Fyna and Nefertiti. And I'm gonna, in the thumbnail for this particular episode, I'm gonna put in the cover to their book, Lioness Chant, which was published according to the copy that I have in my hand currently, Kings and Queens, which was first published in 1989, by Carrier Press, Kings and Queens. 1989 by Carrier Press. Lioness Chant is a spoken word duo that was very, very big in the 1980s, coming through into the 1990s, and they had big enough to get a name for themselves throughout Europe, in fact. Definitely in the UK and France, they had a name for themselves. And they were a mainstay on a number of the events, that were concerning our African artistic expression in the UK. But as I said in the first episode, oftentimes the artistic expression, came at the political events, you know what I'm saying? So there wasn't like a separation between the artistic movement and the political economic movement, you know what I mean? So oftentimes, again, ALD, Kwanzaa celebration, and these kinds of things, you'll find Lioness Chant, performing. And so that's really how I got to know Lioness Chant, you know what I'm saying? The children of Lioness Chant like basically my parents and Lioness Chant were co-parties, and we grew up together as children, I'm saying the various children grew up together in these things. So these are two warrior women poets, without whom I would not be who I am, kings and queens. And so, the reason why we're dealing with Lioness Chant is because it's part of our legacy. So we just want to send a special shout out to Auntie Fyna and Auntie Nefertiti and give a special thank you for the legacy that you have left, You know what I'm saying? And hopefully, the little works that we are doing right now in terms of bringing forward this rise of the Griots spoken word cast will help to shine a light on that legacy and preserve it for generations to come. Before I get into analysing the piece here, what you just heard was We Are Bubble, from the book Lioness Chant. I'm going to actually read, from the foreword to this book, which is written by another wonderful auntie in our community. She goes by the name of Auntie Makeda Colston, I believe she's a poet in her own right also, but she especially does kind of, deal with like curating and archiving the artistic expressions of the African diaspora also. So many times in our UK African community, when it comes to this legacy, Auntie Makeda is very much directly connected to it and can teach a lot about it, And so I'm just going to read, it's a very brief foreword, so I'll read the entire thing. She says, there are a lot of attitudes towards women which limit their authority and power. A lot of myths that are gratefully finding their deaths. Quote, woman, you chat too much. Be seen and not heard. Be a silent worker and supporter, not a vocal leader or innovator, unquote. They go on and on. These epitaphs of a woman's right to be spontaneous, outrageous, and courageous. They go on and on, these epitaphs of a woman's right to be spontaneous, outrageous, and courageous. There have always been women who refuse to shut up and submit to an unjust cause. Rebel women warriors, sustainers of families and builders of institutions. Lioness Chants emerge from this tradition as creative messengers. Nefertiti Gayle and Fyna Dowe combine poetry and music, which carry both bite and humor. For 4 years, Lioness Chant have appeared throughout Britain and France. They have quickly gained a reputation as incisive witnesses of struggle. Provocative and commanding in delivery, they are best known for an earthy wit that unleashes a frontal attack on issues threatening African cultural survival. This premier publication also includes work not usually presented that show the chant as more vulnerable and introspective. Although in the early stages of their creative growth, Lioness Chant continue to experiment with form and focus. This collection documents that process and holds a process for much more to come. Makeda Colston, 1989. Just thought I'd share that with you, family. That's the foreword to the book, And I chose the poem to delve into We Are Bubble, and I'm going to explain the reasons why in a sec, But just to give you an idea of some of the subjects dealt with in this book, there's sold, subject to contract, sold, subject to contract, which is kind of dealing with a lot of the multinational corporations that are, teething up all the resources in the name of capitalist development, in Europe, and how they're exploiting land and resources. There's Summertime, which is a take, on the classic, jazz song Summertime, you know what I'm saying? There's We Are Not This Feminists, yeah, which is a critique of the feminist movement, which was growing during that era. And there was always a kind of a debate between the more black nationalist element and those that were dealing with more conventional feminism. There's inspirational projection, I Sight a Dead Lady, international exploitation, forward out there, my African daughter, yeah, you know what I'm saying, which is just some words of encouragement for African women and these things, you know what I'm saying. So there's another one called Straight Head Gal, you know what I mean. There's another one called Interracial, the classic Tougher Laws, yeah, which deals with the police response, the police and the government response to the uprisings in the 1980s, yeah. Tougher Laws is another one of them classic pieces delivered by Auntie Nefertiti. Yeah. So one of my criterias for the poem that I was going to choose to break down was that the poem had to be written by both of them, yeah, because I didn't want to do one just by Auntie Fyna or just by Auntie Nefertiti. So Bubble We Are Bubble is written by both of them, yeah, because at the end of it, the book contains poems that are written by them together and also poems that were written by them individually. So I wanted to make sure that we get not just one half of the Lioness Chant, but the entire energy of the Lioness Chant. And it's beautiful because Lioness Chant have this book, but they haven't recorded a whole heap, yeah? And whatever they have recorded hasn't been released widely. So I don't remember them performing this poem. I'm not sure if this is one of those ones that Auntie Makide was saying that, you know, they don't usually present. Yeah, but I don't recall them presenting it. So in my delivery of it at the beginning of this particular episode, I'm giving you my interpretation. Yeah, but just letting you know that Auntie Fyna is, as well as being a poet, also a vocalist, a singer. Yeah, so on many of Lioness Chant works, she provides song and spoken word. Auntie Nefertiti is a poet. She provides spoken word. And Auntie Fyna can be found on the album Song of the Motherland by Anom Iyapo, aka Ankh Anum. So in presenting this one now, I'm giving you my interpretation. So I'm hoping that I did justice. I was trying to figure it out, and maybe, you know, with more time and deeper insight, you know, I'd figure a different way to present this, you know what I'm saying? But that's the beautiful thing about poetry and spoken word, that when you're presenting it, you can do it in so many different ways. So I'd love to know from Auntie Nefertiti and Auntie Fyna if that's, you know, if my presentation interpretation was anywhere close to how they would have presented it, yeah. But I'd love to hear them do this piece, yeah. The other reason why I chose this one is because much of it is written in patois, yeah, in Jamaican patois. Now, shout out to Miss Louise Bennett Coverley, aka Miss Lou. Miss Lou is a cultural icon coming out of the beautiful island of Jamaica. And for those who don't know about Miss Lou, in terms of being a cultural icon, was one of the people, the main individual, in fact, responsible for instilling pride in the Jamaican language, what we call Jamaican patois, particularly in that it is a retention of our African cultural heritage, yeah? Prior to Miss Lou, it was seen as uncouth and unsophisticated to speak Jamaican patois. You should be ashamed to be speaking this language. They used to call it talking bad, yeah, talk bad, yeah. Even among the majority African population. And so Miss Lou comes and she says, well, we're not ashamed of our language at all, yeah. And she breaks it down in terms of the different influences on Jamaican patois, coming from the English, coming from the Spanish, and these things. But she says principally, the fundamental thing that patois is derived from is the African languages that were brought to the Caribbean, and not forgetting the remnants of the native, yeah, or the indigenous languages of the Taino people of Jamaica and the Caribbean at large. Yeah, but principally, Jamaican patois is a retention of our African cultural heritage that we bring. Yeah, so I highlight that. And by the way, this year is 100 years. Yeah, the centennial birthday of Mama Miss Lou. Yeah, so we just want to big up Miss Lou because we love Miss Lou like ackee and saltfish and dumpling. You know, see it. All right. So, but Bubble We Are Bubble is written mostly in the patois, yeah, and Auntie Fyna and Auntie Nefertiti obviously, grow over here, yeah. So for the youth them, yeah, and I'm not sure whether both of them were born here, but they were definitely both raised here, yes. So they're part of that first generation that was raised in the UK, for whom speaking patois was a part of the cultural heritage, yeah, holding on to that heritage, yeah, was, a part of our political and cultural affirmation, yeah, during those times. So it weren't just because you come from a Jamaican family, or you come from a family from the Caribbean, you talk patois. Patois was a political statement, like African Gams was a political statement, yeah. And this particular piece, yeah, comes in the style of the dub poet, yeah, you know what I'm saying? The dub poet is like, so for example, in Nigeria, one of the things that Fela Anikulapo Kuti was famous for was writing songs in Pidgin, yeah, which is the local vernacular of the people, the everyday people, yeah, that merges the European language with the traditional, the indigenous language, right? And so because he spoke in Pidgin, basically anybody across the so-called English-speaking West Africa, and in fact English-speaking Africa in general, could tap into what he was saying and glean the meaning from it. And so it gave his music a wider audience, and it gave his message, yeah, a wider reach, yeah. So patois, for many African young people in the UK, was the vernacular, yeah, of the movement in that respect, all right? Not so that we didn't speak English and everything there, but there was a political statement in this thing also, all right? It was an affirmation of the fact. And many a times during this era as well, I remember watching a documentary that juxtaposed the long, hot summer of 1976, yeah, with what was happening in terms of West Indies cricket, yeah, because West Indies toured England during that time, yeah, in a cricket match or a test series. And there's a series in this documentary where they ask a number of black youth, yeah, people in their teens and 20s, do you consider yourself British or English? And all of them said no. They either said I'm black, I'm African Caribbean, West Indian, and all these things, yeah. Anything but British, yeah. And so this was basically an affirmation of identity, and patois was one such expression of the affirmation of identity. The other reason why I picked this poem is because of the title, We Are Bubble, yeah? Now, if you are, a student, yeah, or raised within, reggae music and dancehall culture, We Are Bubble is a term that you find regularly. To bubble is to be enjoying yourself, to be, resting in the vibes. It's like when you put a pot on the fire, yeah, and it a boil, yeah. Then it gets to the boil. When it gets to the boil, it just a bubble, yeah. That means it's hot and it's just existing now within that state of heat. You can turn on the fire and it just a bubble. You know what I'm saying? And if you put something in there like some herbs, yeah, when it a bubble, that's when the herbs are infusing, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Within the water does I soak up the herbs them. You know what I'm saying? So it a bubble. So bubbling is to really marinate, to dwell in the vibration of. That's what bubbling is. So you're going at the dance, you bubble, yeah. It's expressing and experiencing that vibes, but especially in a collective manner, yeah? That's what it means to bubble, yeah? So bubble is a terminology usually used, to express enjoyment, the experience of collectively experienced vibration, or should I say collectively shared vibration, all right? But there's a juxtaposition, I don't say a double entendre, in this particular piece. It says, we are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Somewhere we are go, out of a blasted mind. Now I interpret that, as we're bubbling. We are enjoying ourselves. We are bubble, Everything just look fine. But as we're bubbling, somehow we are go out of our mind, out of a blasted mind. It's like oppression is sending us crazy, And they say that the chains used to be on our feet, now they're on our brains, or on our minds, So it's like, as Amos Wilson said, you will be most enslaved, at the very moment that you think you are most free, We are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Somewhere we are go out of a blasted mind. We are bubble. And then it says, volcano just a rubble. That volcano thing. So it's like we are bubble now. Literally, that's what a volcano does before it erupts. So the idea is that we are bubble. Somewhere we are go out of a blasted mind. We are bubble. The volcano, just a rubble. Is it? It could be the system, the system of oppression that is keeping us locked under this heat, and eventually, because we stay in our bubble, we're just going to erupt, or it will erupt and destroy us. Or it could be that within us just bubbling, there is an awakening taking place. That the volcano that's rubbling is us who are waking up to our guan in our environment. We are bubble. Volcano just a rubble. And we in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. Then it says, Middle East war gone real far. Iraqi planes bombing again. Obviously now, this is some of the topical issues of the time, innit? The Middle East, Iran, Iraq, you know what I'm saying? The Shah of Iran and, Ayatollah and them thing there. That was going on at these times, Oil on the brains, running through Reagan veins. Very important historical reference that is. This is the time of Ronald Reagan, and Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. And for those who may not be aware, Ronald Reagan was, the key American president who at that time basically was facilitating America's intrusion into the Middle East for the sake of acquiring that oil revenue, He was succeeded by Bush the senior, who was succeeded by Bill Clinton, although many people take Bill Clinton out of this equation, but he was very much a part of it. And then also succeeded by Bush the Junior. Ronald Reagan is also the president who presided over the influx, of the crack era into African communities in America, principally on the West Coast in LA, but also in New York and every significant African neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? This is also the era during which the city of Detroit began to be impoverished, as they began to move a lot of the manufacturing industries overseas, So the point is that the African community in America was being impoverished during this era as a result of the policies of Reagan and then Bush. At the same time, the war in the Middle East was being funded and fomented by that same regime as they waxed themselves rich of the oil revenue, So when we talk about America going to war for oil, we realize this is an old situation, And oftentimes, they were running this oil racket, with the help of Britain and through their multinational corporations. So that's what all of that means, Iraqi planes bombing again. Oil on the brains, running through Reagan veins. We are bubble. We are bubble. Iranian planes bombing again. Yeah, so that's just again the whole situation in terms of the so-called Middle East. Yeah, Lebanon in trouble. PLO on the double. The PLO is the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Yeah, the PLO is basically the principal organization, especially at that time, that was fighting for the freedom of the Palestinians in relation to the state of Israel, which was instituted between the years of 1945 and 1948. Yeah, as an act of the UN. Right, the so-called United Nations. And the Jews of the world, yeah, were given this state, yeah, as a part, yeah, just a part of their reparations for what they suffered, in under World War II in Germany in terms of what they call the Holocaust, yeah. And so, because of the injustices that were done to the Palestinian people during that time, the Pan-African movement has often kept close watch on the relationship between America, Britain, and Palestine, and have seen Israel as the regional leg, the regional extension, the regional axis, yeah, of America in particular and Britain in particular in that region. And so I've always had a principled stance against Israel and a principled support to varying different degrees for the people of Palestine. And I say to varying different degrees because in the Pan-African movement, there are different sensibilities. So the national Pan-Africanists might support, Palestine in principle or attack Israel in principle. The more socialist Pan-Africanists, yeah, conventional socialist Pan-Africanists would, have the the Palestinian Liberation Organization on the platform at Africa Liberation Day and various other meetings, for example, and would campaign on their behalf. Because they see it as a fight just against imperialism in general. And so because Israel is an arm of imperialism, they campaign and support the Palestinian people in that respect. The nationalist Pan-Africanists would say, well, you know what? We support the Palestinians in principle, but we've got to start dealing with Wagwan in the Arab world as regards to black people, yeah? We can't be banging out and supporting them when there are black African people being oppressed and in many instances enslaved, yeah, in places like Saudi Arabia. We want them to address that issue, you know what I'm saying? And so they want, the idea is that if we're going to be campaigning, then we have to be making demands for, in relation to our support. It can't come for free, you know what I'm saying? That's just a bit of Pan-African political history there, kings and queens. But PLO on the double is just outlining the response of the Palestinian people to these oppressive and imperialist dynamics that is going on in the world, yeah? Continuing, Israeli war stretch real far, right down in South Africa, yeah? And this is just highlighting, yeah, the fact that for the entirety of Israel's existence, yeah, whatever was going on, remember the state of Israel, was established, yeah, in order to protect Jews from what they faced in Germany and during the Second World War in relation to the Holocaust, yeah. But Israel continued to support the government of South Africa, yeah? The apartheid government of South Africa. This is in the 1980s now, before Nelson Mandela was out of jail, before, of course, he was the president, yeah, and all these things, all right? And so the Israeli government, yeah, continues to support the racist government of South Africa at this moment in time in the 1980s under the governance of P.W. Botha, the devil incarnate, yeah. And Israel and South Africa were doing big business, yeah, during this time, all right? And so the idea of Israeli war stretched real far, yeah, was in relation to the fact that part of what was happening at the time, yeah, was the white government of South Africa had a nuclear arsenal, yeah? Israel didn't have a nuclear arsenal because it was supported by nations with a nuclear arsenal, yeah, but it was doing business with Israel in that respect. And so all of these these nations, were presiding over the direct oppression, of African people, what was being faced by African people in so-called apartheid South Africa, was straight terrorism on a daily basis. Yeah. So in this line, Israeli war stretched real far right down in South Africa. Yeah. They're one exposing the hypocrisy of a nation that was built, to protect another nation, supporting a racist regime that is daily terrorizing African people. And it's also explaining the fact that this global situation, where it says Israeli war stretched real far right down in South Africa, part of a global mafia, These governments are really just gangsters in power, that are robbing and oppressing people. We are bubble. We are bubble. We are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Repeating this what I would say is the refrain. Some of we are go out of a blasted mine. We are bubble. Volcano just a rubble. And we in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. Now you find here that is a technique. Repetition is a technique used in all poetry, but it has a particular kind of, energy and vibration in dub poetry, all right? Pan-European putting on the heat. Yeah. And so, now I don't know this for sure, but I get the impression, because this is 1970s is when, we kind of, as Africans in the UK, were, joining so-called the EU as a part of the government, joining the EU. And so Europe, was coming together, The talk of the ending of the Cold War was beginning to proliferate, you know what I'm saying? And this talk of a united Europe, was beginning to popularize itself, And all these Europeans were collaborating in terms of instituting and ensuring they continue to benefit of African resources by instituting what they call neo-colonialism on the African continent. Neo-colonialism, I'm going to come back to that in a second. Pan-European, putting on the heat, wanting all we Africans to bow down at their feet. We are bubble, Now let me just go into the this idea of neo-colonialism for a sec, So we all know what colonialism is, Colonialism is when the colonizer comes to your land, and he sticks his flag into your land, and him say, I'm here on this, I own this, and the government of your land, they institute a governor who is a representative of the Queen. If you are colonized by Britain, the Queen of England, and they write your laws, they control, your social order, they control your economy from being on the land, and these kinds of things. Well, what happened is in the 1950s and 60s, there was a anti-colonial movement, which resulted in African nations throwing off the shackles, of colonization, So throughout the 1960s, the European powers began to recalibrate, right? They wanted to make sure that they could hold on to their colonial spoils because they were earning enough money, off of the exploitation of these so-called colonies, And in 1965, a man by the name of Osajefo Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book called Neo-Colonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. Neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. And so in the book, Neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism, Osajefo Kwame Nkrumah defines neocolonialism. He says the essence of neocolonialism is that the state, which is subject to it, is in theory independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system and thus its political policy is directed from outside. Yeah, and so basically, in the independence movement, oftentimes we got what was called sham independence or flag and anthem independence, where the colonizer gives you a flag, he also gives you an anthem. Yeah, and basically tells you that you're now independent. Yeah. And he ducks out and he gives you a president or a prime minister also. And then he creates this thing called the Commonwealth, yeah? And, he encourages you, or the person that he puts in place, yeah, signs this deal to be part of the Commonwealth, yeah? Then they come with institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, yeah? And the World Trade Organization. And you sign deals with these international corporations and institutions, which mean that you can't control the price of your own natural resources, yeah? And you can't develop the infrastructure and the manufacturing infrastructure of your nation. And so because of that, your economic policy is now being defined from outside that nation. And once you control the economics of a people, you effectively control their politics. Asante Kwame Nkrumah goes on to say, the methods and form of this direction can take various shapes. For example, in an extreme case, the troops of the imperial power may garrison the territory of the neo-colonial state and control the government of it. More often, however, neo-colonialist control is exercised through economic or monetary means. The neo-colonial state may be obliged to take the manufactured products of the imperialist power to the exclusion of competing products from elsewhere. Control over government policy in the neo-colonial state may be secured by payments towards the cost of running the state, by the provision of civil servants in positions where they can dictate policy, and by monetary control over foreign exchange through the imposition of a banking system controlled by the imperial power. Finally, he says, the result of neocolonialism is that foreign capital is used for the exploitation rather than for the development of the less developed parts of the world. Investment under neocolonialism increases rather than decreases the gap between the rich and the poor countries of the world. The struggle against neocolonialism is not aimed at excluding the capital of the developed world from operating in less developed countries. It is aimed at preventing the financial power of the developed countries being used in such a way as to impoverish the less developed. Yeah? So when they say pan-European putting down the heat, wanting all we Africans to bow at their feet, we are bubble, bubble. That's what they basically mean, yeah? Because, and I'm going to give an example of this later on, but the fact of the matter is that during this time, neo-colonialism had been fully entrenched on the continent. They had got rid of practically all the freedom fighting, liberation, warrior, revolutionary leaders and movements, not movements, but leaders definitely, but they stabilized the movements as a result of doing so, especially on the continent of Africa. And even in the Caribbean, if we look at people like Walter Rodney, Maurice Bishop, and also the movement of Rastafari. Yeah, and so they were basically had entrenched the system of neo-colonialism in a pan-European sense. So they collaborated, yeah, pan meaning all. All these European nations collaborated to institute these conditions in majority African nations, and were also busy oppressing the Africans in the nations of the imperialists. So the Africans in the USA and in the United Kingdom were experiencing police brutality. We're experiencing, a racist hiring practice. We're experiencing being the first to be fired. We're experiencing, laws and social conditions that made us reliant upon a welfare state that continued to impoverish us. And also during this time as well, because there were uprisings in the UK, there was the influx, yeah, of drugs into the black community in the UK during this time. Continuing with the piece, Bota Akom, P.W. Bofa, who I mentioned earlier, the then president of South Africa, yeah, the devil incarnate. Bota Akom to put us to sleep. Reagan Akom to step on with feet. Ronald Reagan. Then we get to Thatcher, I come to kick with underneath. Yeah, Margaret Thatcher was the UK head of this axis of evil, yeah, in relation to, this pan-European heat that are trying to put Africans at their feet. Then now, we get to an interesting name. Mertrand, I come to see if we weep. Who is Mertrand? Let's deal with this Mertrand guy, yeah? Francois Mertrand, yeah? Francois Mertrand. He was the former president of France, yeah? Former president of France, yeah? And he was known to be a socialist, all right? Now, the interesting thing about Francois Mertrand as a socialist is that the socialists in France, yeah, because they fought this revolution and they was, supposed to be all about this liberté and all these things, yeah, justice and liberty and all these principles, yeah. The socialists were known to be anti-colonialism, yeah, anti-imperialism, yeah, workers of the world unite and these things, all right? And so after these nations in Africa that were colonized by France, yeah, fought for and won in some instances their independence, yeah, all right, they were cajoled into signing this deal, yeah, which was known by many different names, yeah, including the independence package, yeah. But what it basically meant is that some 85%, among other things, 85% of the foreign reserve, yeah, as this relates to what Asante Kwame Nkrumah was talking about earlier, was to be held, yeah, in the French Central Bank, yeah. So which means that some $500 billion a year were being paid by African nations into the French treasury, yeah. All right, to hold on to the money at a negative interest rate, all right, which means that they were paying France to hold on to their money, okay? France also had first refusal over any natural resources that were found in the nation, yeah? And the longest lasting legacy of this is the use of the French currency, yeah? The CFA franc, yeah, the franc CFA, yeah? Which the former ambassador, yeah, to the AU in America, yeah, Sister Arikana Chiambori Kwao, yeah, was fired because she licked out, yeah, and spoke out against, yeah, this French currency and these policies of the French as they continue to manifest themselves on the African continent, yeah. So this was the situation and the relationship between France and Africa from the 1960s, yeah, till the 1980s. Francois Mertrand comes to power in 1981. He's born in 1916. He comes to power in France in 1981, yeah, as the head of the Socialist Party, all right? The Socialists are meant to be against imperialism, yeah? They're supposed to be against this relationship that France has, this exploitative relationship between France and Africa. However, Mertrand, yeah, is famous for saying, without Africa, France will have no history in the 21st century. Yeah? Quote, so, as regards this exploitative relationship with Africa, instead of repudiating it, instead of relinquishing it, instead of doing away with it, Francois Mertrand of the Socialist Party, Workers of the World Unite, continued that exploitative relationship, did not repeal the exploitative policies of the French government in relation to Africa. And so, it continues to today, where Africans are still fighting, to get rid of the French currency. I want to say a shout out to all the brothers and sisters all over so-called French-speaking Africa, Central and West, that are fighting against, the French currency. All right, and special shout out to Brother Kemi Seba, one of the leaders of that movement. All right, so that's what they're talking about here. Bota a come to put we to sleep. Reagan a come to step on with feet. Thatcher a come to kick we underneath. Merchant a come to see if we weep. And when you think them have us at we feet, Russia a come to make we deplete. Interesting one, Russia again. Supposedly a communist nation. But the idea basically, is that even the socialists them weren't doing right by us, and the Russians were coming to basically commandeer, basically get us on their side, so they can exploit our resources also. They didn't come for our benefit. They come to get us on their side for their own benefit. But after all that, Bota come, and Reagan come, and Thatcher come, and Merchant come, and Russia come. Boof! We are come. This is our act of self-determination now. We are come with the warrior heat. We have to fight this mental sleep. We can't just sit down and make them come and put we underneath and put we to sleep and step on our feet and make we deplete and all them something there. We have to come with the warrior heat and fight this mental sleep, the mental slavery. We have to fight it, Stand firm on our own 2 feet, So now, the tone of the poem changes, We are bubble, and all these things, Got out of a blasting mind, volcano, just a rubble and all these things. But, boof! We are come with the warrior heat. We have to fight this mental sleep. Stand firm on our own 2 feet. We are bubble. Our people in a trouble. But them nah burst with bubble. Them nah burst with bubble. No matter how much we're in trouble, we still a bubble. And them can't burst with bubble. Cause we are God upon the double. That means as much as the heat, as much as the heat builds up, as much as the oppression builds up against us, we are going to come back with a force, to combat wherever these forces of oppression throw at us. We are God upon the double, and I put them in our trouble. So now the oppressors put us in a trouble, But by fighting for our freedom and our liberation, we put them in a trouble. We are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Somewhere we are go, out of a blasted mine. And this was true. This was a reality at the time, because in the 1980s, there was a strong Pan-African upheaval going on around the world, inspired in part by Maurice Bishop, who was assassinated in 1983, and Thomas Sankara, who was assassinated in 1987. You know what I'm saying? But these people were inspirations, for the black world and Africans in the UK in particular, because many of us were coming over from Africa and the Caribbean, or were just first generation during that time. We had a global purview of a lot of these issues. So many of the Pan-African organizations started to pop up during that era. You know what I'm saying? That the Pan-African Congress movement was the foremost, alongside the All African People's Revolutionary Party. There were also organizations that preceded them called the Black Unity and Freedom Party. The Al-Kebla Revivalist movement came up in that era. You know what I'm saying? There were enough organizations. And also, in 1987, that was the first year that Black History Month was first observed, and that was a manifestation of a strong Pan-African energy at that time also, because, Sally Mugabe came over, as the wife of Mugabe. Grace Machel, the wife of Samora Machel, came over. Baba Tony Martin came over to wax lyrical on the life of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and the UNIA ACO. Hugh Masekela came over. Nina Simone came over. Thomas Sankara sent a message of congratulations and support and all these things, kings and queens. Don't have time to go into the whole history there, but the point is that when them say we are bubble, our people in a trouble, but them nah burst with bubble, cause we are good upon the double, and I put them in a trouble. yeah, that was real for the people them during the 1980s because they were building up these Black Power Pan-African movements. Yeah, we are bubble on the line. Everything look fine. Somewhere we are go. Out our blasted mine. We are bubble. Volcano just a rubble. And we in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. All nation in a trouble. Yeah. So what they've done with this piece, brothers and sisters, like, is just put the whole African experience in a global context, yeah, and spoken about how, yeah, the global situation is affecting African people and how African people are going to be responding, yeah, to this global crisis and all these things. And it's beautiful because many times, yeah, we as African people get caught up in our people's issues, yeah, without focusing on our own. And so what they did with that poem is demonstrate how we can have a global purview, but from an African perspective, yeah? But from an African perspective, we look at the global purview, centering ourselves and how this relates to us, yeah, and our people. And from that perspective, we look at how it affects the world, yeah? And we position ourselves principally, yeah, in relation to the principles of justice, making sure that justice is first exercised among us, that we demand justice from the rest of the world, and that we ensure that we are not unjust, yeah? That we support justice in the rest of the world also. And I also, once again, love the metaphor of we are bubble in all its different expressions, all its different manifestations, whether it be we are bubble, in our state of enjoyment, experiencing and enjoying each other in our fight, or just we are bubble in the sense of the fact, the idea that we're in this state of euphoria in the midst of a global crisis and we're not witnessing it, yeah? Or we are bubble in the sense of the fact that we're getting hot now. Yeah, the volcano is now becoming us. And as these forces begin and continue, yeah, to encroach upon our liberation and our freedom, we're gonna bubble to the point that we erupt, yeah, and burst out all this hot lava, yeah, all over the world. Fire for every oppressor. And the beautiful thing about lava is that when it cools, yeah, when it cools, it forms the most fertile soil. It gives way for the bearing of new fruits and new vegetation and new ways to feed the masses, yeah, and fertilize the earth, kings and queens. This has been Rise of the Griot Spoken WordCast. We have been breaking down We Are Bubble, as brought to you by the fantastic warrior duo known as Lioness Chant. Tendamwari, Hotep, Uncle Jasaneb, Rastafari, Uhuru, African power for all African people. Rise of the Griots WordCast.